Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.
Hafidades and Tiro, welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry Harris, and with us today is no stranger to the show. He's a retired educator and a Marianas historian, Mr. Don Farrell. Don, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Kathy.
And
always a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's especially nice to have you here today because there's something we're congratulating you for, and that is the first foreign language publication of your book, Saipan, A Brief History. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Tell us, when was this book first written and what prompted you to write it?
Oh, my wife. My wife and I met on Guam back in the early 80s and moved to Tinian in 1987. And she had seen the books I had written about Guam. So when we moved to Tinian, she said, "You will now write the history of the Northern Marianas." And I said, "Yes, ma'am."
Like a good husband, and that was a good request she gave you, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's been a huge amount of fun. I actually thought, after so many years of living on Guam and writing the history of the Guam, that I really knew the history of the Marianas. I didn't know jack. I recognized that when I got here and realized how very different was the culture and history of the four populated islands of the Southern Marianas. See, Guam, Rota, Tinian, and Saipan. So it was a great learning experience for me, and I'm very pleased to have been able to work on this history and produce some works that will help the people of the Northern Marianas see the recorded history of their islands.
Now, the publication is a little over 100 pages. How did you decide what you were going to write about and how much information you were going to give?
Oh, that was a mechanical process, to tell you the truth, Kathy. We produced the first history, the brief history of Tinian, back in 1987 when we first moved to Tinian and called it home. I think it was about 98 pages, and then it just slowly developed into a larger project until we developed a history of Tinian in the format that it's seen today, at 112 pages with 16 pages of color photographs, the island today, and that's become the standard now for our books on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam.
Looking at the inside of the cover here on this beautiful book that you gifted me with, thank you. I see that it was most recently republished in 2016. So what are some of the changes that are in this new latest English edition published last year?
The majority of the new stuff is because of the changing administrations, right? We want people who purchase the book today, particularly our non-resident visitors, to be able to take something home that tells the story of the island today, including its current leadership and the current issues.
Now, people probably also know you as the author of the CNMI textbook for Northern Marianas history class, which is very large. Is this book taken as excerpts from that, or how are they related?
Well, there's only one history, so obviously they have to be related. But these brief histories were created for people, not for the classroom, not for the school teacher, not for the academician, but for everybody to be able to share and enjoy the history of their island. So the brief history of Saipan, for instance, is only focused on the island of Saipan. So anyone who lives on Saipan or visits Saipan has a history of their island with the key points, the key issues, key events, and the best photographs that we could find related to the history of Saipan.
And I do have to say, a lot of these photos, I mean, much of the book is photos, which makes it very readable for people who need a little graphics to break up their reading. And the interesting thing is that a lot of times when we look at Mariana's history, we read Mariana's history, we come across the same photos. You know, the Chamorro woman at the front of the cave with the cross, the raising of the flag under the first municipal administration. But there are a lot of photos in here that I haven't seen before. How hard did you have to search to come up with some of these?
Well, I've been collecting photographs and documents about the Mariana Islands ever since back in the early 80s. So I have a huge collection of photographs and documents that can be used for a variety of different purposes. When I got ready to create this special edition of specifically the history of Saipan, I searched through all of those photographs to choose the ones that I thought were most important and most explicative, right? So that, as you suggested, when a person reads the story, they have a visual image that goes with that story. And as an educator, as a school teacher, I have found that a photograph, in the old saying, tells 1,000 words, right? So my story can only be limited to the amount of space available for those words, but the photograph often tells the story.
Well, this year, in fact, I think it was just last month, you premiered or you launched the Korean and Chinese versions of Saipan, A Brief History. What prompted you to have it translated?
That's an excellent question, Kathy. The history of the Northern Marianas is, of course, important to our local people. But it is also important to the thousands and thousands of other people who live on our island and who visit our island every year. So when I got ready to do this new edition with the current photographs of our current political and elected officials, the current events and everything, I visited with the management of Pacific History Parks. These are the people who manage American Memorial Park Gift Center as well as the Gift Center at the War in the Pacific Park on Guam. And they suggested that they needed something in Chinese and Korean for their visitors because there was nothing for them. I took that request then to the Marianas Visitors Authority and asked them, what do you guys think? Because I frankly didn't know whether or not foreigners would buy a copy of the book, even if we translated it into their own language. And everybody suggested, yes, Don, there is a percentage of the population of visitors and local people who will purchase the book. You know, I don't make a lot of money off of these things. As long as I can make back enough to pay the bank loan for the printing, then really to me it's just a very pleasant hobby. As long as I can pay for it, I move on to the next publication. So we gave it a shot, and it has worked. So I'm very pleased with the way things have turned out.
What results are you seeing?
Well, the Chinese and the Koreans who are visiting our local stores and hotels and gift shops are purchasing books. That means they're taking it home and they're putting it on their coffee table in Beijing or Seoul or wherever they come from. And that's encouraging more people to come back and visit our islands. So I believe that we have served two purposes. One, we've transmitted the history of our island to the outside world. And number two, we've contributed to our visitor industry.
Tell us where this book is now available, both in English and the Korean and Chinese, in case any of our listeners are interested in either letting their non-English speaking friends know that it's available and where they can find it.
It's in all of the major retail outlets on Saipan. Jotens, of course, has been a number one supporter, American Memorial Park Visitors Center, number one supporter, and the vast majority of the hotel gift shops are also carrying it. So it's out there for people to find. It's not a big thing. I'm never going to make $1 million off of it, right? But it will sell enough copies to keep us going, because we're going to move on from here to our next publication.
Which will be what? Now you got to answer that question.
That was a leading question.
Yes.
Thank you very much for following up. Well, we have to do a new edition of Guam: A Brief History. So I'm leaving for Guam during Liberation to meet with Shannon Babauta and Monica Guzman and all the people down there to do a new volume for them. But the big project I have now is called Tinian and the Bomb. It's the untold story of what really happened on Tinian during World War II for the creation of the atomic bombs, their assembly, and their delivery from Tinian.
A fascinating story, and most people out of the Marianas have never heard of it. So that'll be a great read.
I think people will enjoy it, and it explains exactly why the use of the bombs became necessary. Had the bombs not been used when they were used, the Soviet Union would have occupied Hokkaido, the northernmost of the Japanese home islands, and Japan would have been divided into North Japan and South Japan, just like North Korea and South Korea, and there never would have been peace in the Pacific, and we would have no visitor industry in the Northern Marianas today. So I do think that people will appreciate it. It'll be a different book. It's a technical publication in some ways. It's not just a little picture book. It's all footnoted and everything like that.
Looking back on when you wrote this publication and updated it, are there any particular stories or photos that have special significance for you, or were particularly interesting to you or unusual?
Actually, that's an impossible question, because I wouldn't have put them all in there if each and every one of them were not important to me. I think that the most important thing that people will get out of it is that they can see the progress of Northern Marianas history from ancient Chamorro times all the way through the creation of the CNMI and the Commonwealth and the Covenant and our current government operations.
In any way, do you feel your publications are beloved children of yours, or do you have any emotional connection to these publications?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have asked me that question if you didn't know the answer, Kathy.
Well, I was hoping you would say. Yeah.
Every publication is the baby of the author and creator. So every time I do this, it is giving birth to something new. And when it turns out well, and people accept it as they have these, then I'm a proud father.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're speaking today with Don Farrell about his publication, Saipan, A Brief History, now available not only in English, but Korean and Chinese. And we'll be back after this break.
This September, the Northern Marianas Humanities Council, Northern Marianas College, University of Guam, and Guampedia will host the 3rd Marianas History Conference in Saipan. The conference theme, One Archipelago, Many Stories, Milestones in Marianas History, highlights the deep and rich history of the Mariana Islands. It also bridges the political division of the archipelago, which dates to the late 19th century. The conference steering committee is now accepting abstracts under the following general categories: ancient history, including the results of archaeological research; early colonial history in the 17th and 18th centuries; colonial history in the 19th and early 20th centuries; World War II; recent post-war; and oral history and genealogical research. For more information, visit the Northern Marianas Humanities Council website at northernmarianashumanities.org. That's northernmarianashumanities.org.
Welcome back to Your Humanities Half Hour. We're speaking today with retired educator and Marianas historian Dawn Farrell. Dawn, you've put together, as you said, several publications now on the history of the Marianas, and you have a particular concern about the availability of historical records. What did you have to go through, or what would a person today have to go through if they wanted to write a publication like SaipanA Brief History?
Excellent question, Kathy. Much of the material you'll see in all of my publications are photographs and documents that I have collected over the last many years, since the early 1980s, with visits to the United States National Archives, CB Archives, the Air Force Archives, the Navy Archives, the CB Archives in Oxnard, California, the Atomic Bomb Archives in Los Alamos, but also to the Hamilton Library at University of Hawaii at Oahu. They have a great collection there, as well as Micronesian Area Research Center in the University of Guam. What I have recognized is that we do not have such a collection here in the Northern Marianas. I am concerned because obviously somebody else has got to pick up the ball here and get ready to write the next generation of history of the Northern Marianas, and I'm afraid that they don't have anything to work from. Fortunately for me, I've lived here for so long that I have so many contacts and friends all the way from the first administration that I was able to talk to people personally and ask them for photographs and documents and evidence to be able to work on this current history. What's going to happen 20 years from now when somebody else needs to step forward to write the next volume of Northern Marianas history? Because there is virtually nothing available to them. So I have been working with the people at the Northern Marianas College, and specifically with the Northern Marianas Archives, to find a way to make sure that all of the documents a future historian will need are available for them in a dependable archive. The Northern Marianas College and the people at the archives have been tremendously supportive. However, they need help. They need financial support. For so many years, the archives have been ignored in the annual budget. And as a result, they do not have the staff, nor do they have the hardware or electronic hardware or software to be able to fulfill the need. So I have spoken to Governor Torres, to Senate President Arnold Palacios, and to members of the House of Representatives about the need to correct this problem quickly. so that all of these documents that are created every day by every agency in the CNMI government are deposited at the Northern Marianas Archives as per the law that was created in the 3rd Northern Marianas Legislature, that the CNMI Archives would be located at the Northern Marianas College, and that it would be the repository for all official documents of the CNMI.
All official documents, that's a lot.
Yes, it is. I can appreciate why it was difficult, if not impossible, in the early days when there were only paper copies. However, today we're talking about everything is digital today. All of the documents created by the CNMI legislature and the government's agencies in the Northern Marianas, all of the photographs that are taken by the public information officers that work for all the various agencies of the Northern Marianas government are all digital. So we have a different world today, and it can be done. So I have taken it upon myself to try to work with the Northern Marianas College and the CNMI government to see to it that these documents are properly recorded, so that whoever decides to write history in the future has an accurate source of information.
If a person were to go today to the CNMI Archives, what would they find?
You will find a picture of the governor that is not in the archives but is posted on the wall because it was never transmitted. You will find a photograph perhaps of the current legislature, but it's not in the files. What we want to do is to create a filing system not different from Guampedia, right, or the other online files, to where you or anybody else can dial in Northern Marianas Archives. A file will come up and you can type in Ralph Torres. His name and everything related to his administration will show up. Or you can dial in Benigno Fitial, and his photographs and his files will all show up, whether you're from the Northern Marianas or somewhere around the world. The internet is an international thing. There are people around the world. Obviously, we have visitors from China, Korea, Russia, America. We have worldwide visitors here. They want to know about us, but they have no access to our real history.
What about some of the other sources of historical records here in the Northern Marianas? What have been some of your better sources, you feel?
I wish I could answer that question. The vast majority of it has been personal contact with people sending me documents. There just really is no repository of Northern Marianas history. I hate to say that, but that's the flat truth.
Mm-hmm. Why do you feel it is that it seems that historical preservation, not just the office, HPO, but in general, for example, our museum, the archives, have not received the attention that they maybe should have?
You're asking me almost a cultural political question there, right? And I wish I had an answer for you. I think it is important. I think that when people see the new modern history of the Northern Marianas that's going to be out maybe by the end of this month, or they look at my book, they're going to say, is that true? How can they check it? And I wish they would. Where would they go to find the documents that I used? They don't have a place to do that. The college students, high school students, our high school teachers, our college instructors have no access to these documents. So it's actually breaking new ground. I feel very confident that the time is right and that this administration and this legislature will support the financing necessary to make this happen so that their legacy is preserved. Right now, from the days of Carlos Camacho until today, their legacy does not exist as far as historical research is considered.
Now, you've been a historian since before, I would say, the days of Xerox. What's the machine that came before the Xerox with the black?
The mimeograph?
Yeah.
I got some of them.
Okay, so you've been around since the mimeograph, and now we're in the age of digitization. Obviously, the benefits are exponential, as you've mentioned, but do you see any downside to the way history is kept to date? For example, Wikipedia, which is not really a reliable source. Anybody can go on and say anything about the topic that they want. What do you feel about the way history is being preserved?
I think that Shannon Mabauta and the people that run the Wikipedia on Guam have proven the value of publishing accurate historical documents. It is important, and as you suggest, it needs to come from a source where people can say to themselves, if I go to this source, I'm going to find accurate and reliable information. We can do that. Perry Pangilinan, the new director at the CNMI Archives, Sam Crawford, and the others that are there at the Northern Marianas College Library, these people also want to see the reputation of history correctly presented, and that they will become what they should be, which is a repository of our history and the source for outside people. So we have today, there are more Chamorros living in America than there are living in the Marianas. And a very large number of them are college students or high school students, and they want to tell our story. This will give them a chance to say, you want to know our story? Go to the Northern Marianas Archives online. And it'll be a worldwide resource for accurate information. And I believe the Northern Marianas College can do that.
Well, you really are a wellspring of information, very knowledgeable, of course, having had a passion for the history of the Marianas for so many years. Any closing thoughts before we go on where we are now, where you are personally as part of the history of the Marianas and where you're heading? What are your thoughts?
I would huge question. You got another hour? I think that mostly as an NMI history teacher, that it would be that people appreciate that the value of the history of their islands is important to the future of the islands. That studying the past and the mistakes and the good things that have happened will help us better prepare for dealing with our future. We are in a very disturbed time. The military situation in the Western Pacific, the potential military development are very controversial issues. The current economic plans for Saipan and the Commonwealth are very difficult issues. I just hope that people will use access to real documents and real history to help them make their judgments on what we are doing today and not just what appears in the day-to-day news. With all due respect to our reporters, I think they're good people, but they can only deal with today's news, all the news that fits. So I would simply say studying history of the islands will prevent us from repeating mistakes and help us do a better job in the future.
Well, again, we want to congratulate you on your Korean and Chinese version of Saipan, A Brief History, available, as you've said, Choten, the American Memorial Park, many other places. We want to wish you the best on your revision for Guam, A Brief History, and we look forward to you turning your attention back to the Northern Marianas after you finish that project.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Kathy.
Our guest today has been retired educator, Marianas historian, and author Dawn Farrell. This has been your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry Harris.
This program was supported by a We the People grant awarded to the Northern Marianas Humanities Council from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.